that crazy? 3 full semesters, weeks and weeks and weeks of studying and writing papers, and 2 of you have already turned in your final paper. Yeah? You guys ready for the final paper? Feel overwhelmed by it? Okay. Because a couple people were like, well, I made them do this great final paper. They had to get together a whole list of things that they need to do before they go, and what would be like when they get there. There's no way they're going to know. I just want them to really think about it. Like, why would you torture? I just wanted everybody to think.
That's awesome.
Yeah. All right. So today, without being too distracted, today we're going to be talking about re-entry. And last week we had a good time with our 2 guest speakers, and they both said, and I think we remember it clearly, that re-entry was the hardest thing they ever did. And after they talked to us about learning language and adapting and leading cross-culturally and all that, and then they said, yeah, re-entry was way worse than all of it. And returning back home, you don't expect that. So that's what we want to cover tonight. And really this brings us to a conclusion of our classroom training. After this, for those of you that want to make the next step and actually go out and begin to do that, we'll have postgraduate training or postgraduate coaching, I should say. So you've got the classroom stuff. Then there's the sit-down one-on-ones. Let's find a missions organization for you, talk about your home church, pray with you through the things that you want to do, find other missionaries that are already doing it, all of the things we've talked about in class. After this, we want to start going that direction. So let's open with a word of prayer. Lord, we thank you for bringing us through 2 years of waiting upon you, wanting to hear your voice, trusting in you, Lord, understanding the Great Commission, and wanting to follow you in that. We pray tonight as we come to this conclusion of this chapter of our life, this moment of training, God, that you will solidify these things in our lives, that you will cause them to be so rooted deep into our heart that no matter what the emotions bring or the situation brings, that you and your reality and the eternal aspect of all of this, Lord, it will be solid and firm and fixed in our lives, that it will never be moved by these trials that we will face and that we're preparing to face. We worship you, Jesus. Lead us down this path of brokenness that we may serve you, love you, and minister to others in your name. In your name, Jesus, we pray. Amen. Amen. All right, well, tonight, Jonathan is with us, and he's going to be sharing with us about re-entry. Jonathan, why don't you go ahead and give us just a short testimony.
Sure.
Maybe how you and your wife met, just for 30 seconds, and then into missions, and then from there.
Let's see. We met when we were like 3 and 4. So we've actually known each other most of our lives. Ended up going different ways when we were kids and different places, but we ended up transferring back into the same high school. And so we've known each other and been in class together and everything for a huge part of our life. So we just celebrated 15 years of marriage back in August. So yeah, it was really cool. It was really exciting. And for us, for missions, I had been working with youth, and so my experience with missions was just our short little trips down to Mexico. That was what we had done for when I was in high school, and then when I was helping lead high school. That's pretty much it. And I kept praying and asking and thinking, okay, even in high school, I was like, okay, God, I want to take this trip. You'd get those little brochures for all like the Teen Mania things, and like, that's it, I'm going. I'm gonna go to this crazy country, and nothing ever worked out. So it was like, all right, well, I guess God doesn't want me to go here. God doesn't want me to go here. And it's kind of funny. We're kind of coming full circle. It was in a missions class at this campus. That Adrienne, when she was here at the Bible College here, took a class, and guest speaker comes running in, totally late. It was Rob.
Oh, that was my first time teaching.
With Andrew Russell, yeah.
Were they concluding the worship song, and I came running up?
Yeah, with Dave was there. Awesome. Yes. Okay. Well, that
years
night,
ago.
Yes, years ago.
It
was 13 years ago. It's 13 years ago. Yeah. But that night sparked something in Adrienne, and then she brought it home to me about we should take a mission trip. We should go, and we ended up taking 2 short-term trips out to Kenya 2 years in a row, and kind of just knew that this is where we were heading. So we moved out to Kenya. We had at that
East
point,
Africa.
yeah,
East Africa.
Yeah,
right.
East
just,
Africa.
Just for reference.
yeah, East Africa.
You've gone to Kenya, South
Not
Sudan.
the country of Africa, because that doesn't exist.
right, yeah.
It's the continent of Africa.
In the East African region.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes. So we go out there, and when we left, we had two boys. One that was 2.5, and one that was like 16 months and just started walking right before. We went out to help a church that was out there, and we helped transition that church from a very American style of doing things to a much more Kenyan style of doing things, but it took us a very long time to do that. And then taught at the Bible college out there.
And all those missionaries were pretty much brand new. So they were discovering it and learning it.
Yeah, I think we came in like the second generation, the second wave of missionaries from Calvary into Kenya and East Africa.
Very little training is what I'm referring to.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of training.
Might have been there for
us.
5 years, but nobody really understood how to do it culturally.
No, it took us a long time, and so I think we took the mistakes we learned from the previous missionaries, and then made a ton more of our own mistakes, and then realized, okay, this is where we need to be heading. And so, like, when we left that church, we were leaving it in completely Kenyan leadership, and that church is flourishing. And it's actually doing better now than it ever was with the Americans, and even with our American money and American educations and everything. It's like nothing compared to what they're doing now. It's just vibrant and thriving, and it's really cool to see that. And so I was there and did work with with the Bible college out in Nairobi as well. Taught there for like 4 years.
And that's maybe 3 or 4 churches would all kind of attend that Bible college.
We have actually a lot. It's the different Calvaries all send guys to it, but it's the lowest cost Bible education in all of like Kenya.
Area, right.
So we get a lot of guys coming from different denominations, a lot of Pentecostals and Presbyterians, everyone. They're like, well, I can't afford to go to seminary, but I can go to Bible college.
Right.
So we get a lot of guys that come in for that. And so, it's impacting. And so I think right now, when we moved out there, there were 3 Calvary chapels in Kenya, and right now there's about 18 or 19.
Okay.
And these are now planting out other churches. So it's like churches, we go out and we plant, but then we send somebody out from there, they planting a church, and now they're starting to plant churches out of there. So it's multiplying like crazy. It's going, it's just absolutely amazing with the work that's going on out there.
Sounds like the book of Acts.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's like, old school style right there. So, while we were there, we had a third child, and then
you lived there for how long total?
7.5 years.
Okay, all right.
7.5 years. So while we were there, we had another child, and we then adopted a fourth. So we had, at one point, we're having 4 boys in this little house that's like, you've seen the house. You saw that house.
I remember coming over.
It was like, we had a 2-bedroom house that had no dining room. It was a kitchen and then a living room and 2 bedrooms and a bathroom. That was it. So there were 6 of us living in this, and these were not big rooms at all, but God's grace got us through.
Right.
But so we ended up, we had adopted a child that had special needs. He had some hydrocephalus issues and it's water on the brain, and ended up last year he got extremely sick and he ended up passing away. So we had to deal with all of that out there of dealing with that, and decided to come back for a furlough for a time away of just kind of, let's get away and have some time. But while we were here, God made it clear that it actually was time for us to be wrapping up, that we had finished the ministry we were sent out to do. And it was time. It was like, no, the work is done. You could go out and do more, but there's no point because these churches are now planting themselves. We don't need more of us out there. So it was like,
and you had already handed over leadership 2 years ago.
I had handed over leadership 2 years ago. Yeah. Well, I switched roles. I was the senior pastor, and I had the associate pastor. We switched roles, and I became his assistant for a year. And the church was doing good, but it still reached a point with us there, I think, it still reached a point where there was a lot of still dependence on everything. Like, I left and I was like, I don't know how they're going to pay rent, but I've already told them 5 months ago, I'm like, hey, when we leave, I told the church that. I'm like, we're not going to continue to pay the rent and everything, you guys got to do it. But I then told the pastors there, I'm like, if you need help, just let me know. And never got a phone call, never once. Like week one after that, the church is like, we need to step up, we need to do this. And again, they've given more and they've done more and they're supporting. They've got kids that are the street boys in Nairobi, and they're now supporting one that's in a home and started him off with a business. So they're like helping kids who are like on the streets, living in the streets of Nairobi, and putting them into getting them apartments and helping them in this way. And so it's just amazing what they're able to do. But yeah, we had handed the leadership over a couple years before, and part of us while we were still there was we were waiting for all the adoption paperwork to finish.
Okay.
And so we're like, well, we're just waiting for this to finish, and then we'll probably come back. And then when he passed away, it's like, well, we don't have to wait for the paperwork anymore. So it's like we realized, wait, no, we kept saying this was our time, and it's there. So we realized, okay, we're here to stay now. So we are going back in January for a few weeks to wrap up everything, sell off the last of our stuff, and then we'll be back.
Back here to the States.
Yep.
And your church is Calvary Refuge?
Yep, we're at Refuge down in Huntington Beach.
Huntington Beach, yeah.
Yep.
And then you're serving there now full-time?
Part-time there. I'm working with two different ministries. I'm working part-time at the church right now. Fell back into my old junior high position, so I'm doing junior high, and also working with a mobile Bible app on our phones called Through the Word.
Okay, great. And being back being back in ministry was a little bit helpful. You were overwhelmed by it, but it was helpful at the same time.
Yeah, you know what? I think being back in the ministry, it gave me, for me, one of the biggest challenges of coming back was how am I going to take care of my family now? For 7.5 years, we've been on support, and now we're having to transition into now you got to get a job. And so both of these opportunities coming along provided some help with that, and being like, okay, this is more, able to take care of that. And it was good for that purpose, and I think it was also good to have that vision in ministry still focused. As soon as we knew we thought we were going to be here for a period of time, my buddy said, hey, help me with my app. When we knew we were going to be here full time, like that week, my pastor's like, okay, you're back full time? Great, you want to come back on staff? So, and I jumped at that chance, yes, I knew I needed to do that. I couldn't
be part of the body again.
Yeah, you got to be part of the body again. That's one of the biggest things is when you come back is getting plugged back into that church right away. You've got to get plugged in.
Right, yeah. All right, so let's talk about dealing with stress. And we can call this reentry shock. We can call this reentry stress. And one of the crucial parts of this is the further you go from home, remember, the longer it takes to adapt. Well, when you return, the further you're coming from back to where you're going to be planted back into the U.S., that distance culturally is going to determine how long or how heavy that stress is going to be. So in dealing with stress, some of my notes, I put down confusion, frustration. Are these things normal when you are reentering a new society?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. I think that for the whole family, we went through times of confusion, even after we knew we were going to be here full time, even after we knew we were moving back permanently. And when I say permanently, I use that word loosely. We never know for sure, right?
For this season.
For this long-term season, we're back. We never know where God's going to lead us. But even after we knew we were going to be there was still a lot of confusion. Okay, where are we going to live? Where are we going to stay? There's frustration when dealing still with finishing up everything back in Kenya, and there's still confusion over wait, who's got our stuff right now? Where's it all sitting? Who's got this? Who's got that? And people are, hey, are you going to sell this? And so there's still those kind of frustrations.
Practical confusion.
Yeah, there's practical things, but there's also the spiritual things of am I a failure? Have I failed because now we're back? Because part of us is thinking, we're going to be here forever, and there's that kind of confusion. It really feels like you're going through a period of just absolute chaos when you come back. Everything, because when you move over there, you expect that culture shock. You expect what's also called culture stress, the long-term things. You start developing all these, and you start getting used to it, though, a little bit. You may not fully ever get used to it. In fact, you never will fully get used to the culture there. But when you start coming back...
Overseas culture.
Overseas culture, foreign culture, you never fully understand it. But you start getting used to it. And so all of a sudden now you're coming back, you just get jolted again. And you don't expect it necessarily coming back. The first furlough is one of the hardest times for most missionaries. Now, when you're moving back as well, then you have to deal with, wait, now I've got to find a home, I got to find a job, I got to get a new car, we've got to figure out where are we going to put our kids in school. All those things you deal with when you move, you got to deal with coming back here. But there's the confusion as well as nobody else understands that.
Yeah.
Because when you go over there, all the other missionaries are behind you and they're like, oh yeah, here, let's help you find a car, let's help you do these things. But when you come back, everyone here expects you, well, you're an American, you've got these things figured out, why are you so stressed out about it all?
Right.
And so that's a big thing for us.
You should know better than that.
Yeah.
And you expect to know better than that.
And yeah, you do, you really do. You expect to know these things because you're like, all right, I'm going... At first you're thinking, I'm going home, and then you're realizing, no, I left home, or am I going home? And it's so you get this confusion. Yeah, where is home?
Right.
Where's home? My boys, again, my oldest was only 2.5 when we moved over there. So that's, the whole life of our boys has been in Kenya, and so it's like coming here. They're not American, so it's
And you were saying you had to teach them a couple things.
I had to teach my oldest son, and at the time when he came, he was 10 years old, I had to teach him how to cross the street because he's never had to worry about crossing a street in the States of look left, look right, look left again.
Yeah.
Never had to worry about that. We live on a dirt road outside of town, and it's like the biggest things we have to worry about on our street are the impala or a giraffe.
Literally. Which are animals.
Not the impala, not the Chevy Impala.
You're talking about animals. Yeah.
The actual impala with the horns. I had to teach him how to cross the street because he didn't know these things. Or there's a lot of little things like that you're like, oh my gosh, my kids are so not.
I remember coming back, and we were both in former British colonies. So they drive on the other side of the street. So you don't look left, look right, and look left again. You look left, you look right, and you look left again. You guys follow me on that? You look the wrong way. And so I'm like in England, and I go step off the street because I didn't see anybody coming. I was looking that way, and they were coming this way. And I almost got killed. Same thing. And then I got back here, and I'm like, where should the traffic? Crossing the street was a challenge for me.
Or you make the left-hand turn into the wrong side of the street.
Oh, bro.
Yeah. I never did that in Kenya, but I've done it a couple times back here. Our first furlough. You do that.
My first time driving in Uganda, because we're neighboring countries, right? We all get in the car. The whole group of Americans are in this big white SUV, right? Wes Bentley had set us up with this car, and we were going to go conquer the world. We were driving from Uganda to Kenya. So I get and I start going around the roundabout, right? And around a roundabout would be this way for us, but for them it's the other way. So I'm going the wrong way. Well, thankfully it was Sunday morning and there was nobody on the street. Cop steps out in the middle of the street, puts his hand up, and goes, "White man, we drive that way." And I'm like, oh, and I'm backing up and trying to. Now imagine if it was all that traffic coming around those roundabouts. Looks like a herd of buffaloes coming at you, right? But they're cars. So then I come back to the States on furlough. Maybe I had been gone for 2 years, and I hadn't heard worship in a really long time. My mother-in-law had this gorgeous Lexus with the greatest sound system you've ever heard. So now I'm in a car on a real road with real sound, and I put in this CD, and I'm just worshiping as I'm driving down the street. Well, of course, I'm on the wrong side of the road, right? Because it's Thursday night after church. So I'm on the wrong side of the road, and I'm driving, and this car's coming right at me, and I'm thinking, that guy better yield. Why doesn't he get over, right? Because I'm on his side, and we get almost till we touch bumpers, and it's a cop. His lights go off, and all of a sudden I snap out of it. I'm on the wrong side of the road. So I jerk off the road, and I'm over here, and I'm parked. Cop walks up, he goes, "You've been drinking?" Right? He goes through the whole thing. I'm like, "No, sir, I promise I haven't been drinking." He goes like, "This is a really nice car." I'm actually, I'm a missionary, and I just got back from Africa. And he's like, "Whatever." So I pull out my passport, I show him the date. He goes, "Go home. Just get out of here and go home." I literally almost, head in with the cop. And you feel totally lost.
You do. You really do. Yeah, you totally feel lost and
happens,
confused.
You think, if I can't drive, what can I do? I'm a grown man. I'm a pastor. I'm a leader, and I can't even drive without getting myself killed by,
that confusion also extends even further with so we actually had to go through a period where we were changing houses constantly because we were in this giant limbo stage, right? We had 15 moves in a 6-month period.
That's horrible.
Yeah, it's horrible.
Yeah, and the kids were
there's the confusion of every time you go into a new house, it's like, well, what's the schedule like here in this house? What are their normal things? What do they do for food? Who cooks? Who does this? What what's expected of us,
Right.
and how much do we get involved in these kind of things, or should we just kind of always go back to our room and let them do their own thing?
Right.
So you have all those confusions of things as you come back. If you don't have like if someone doesn't hand you just straight up and go, hey, here's the keys to your own house, here's the keys to your car, make sure you drive on the right side of the road.
Exactly.
And, you're all set. And here's a cell phone, the fridge is fully stocked. If you don't do that, you're going to go through these confusion times as you're transitioning back.
Right.
It happens every furlough, and definitely when you come back as well.
You guys hearing that? That's the crucial part. As a missions pastor, I had to learn that. They need a car, a bed, and a phone.
Yes.
And privacy for a couple days, right? Just let them be. And that was the crucial thing.
It's almost like saying, okay, great, the church has booked you a hotel for a few days, and here's put room service on the church card, and
right.
I mean, honestly, you need to just be able to say that, or here's a place to stay, an apartment that somebody's gone.
Yeah.
Here's 2 weeks worth of food.
Yeah.
Those are things that need to happen.
And
for
not with a bunch
missionaries.
of other kids on top of your kids, and your two moms trying to share a kitchen, and it's just a total mess. So is it totally normal to come back and be completely disillusioned?
Oh my gosh, disillusionment is like...
Right. It's just normal. What I'm saying, it's normal.
Yeah.
The way we describe it is you feel like you're in a fog. You're just in a fog. You have no idea what you're doing. Have you ever been stuck in fog? Have you guys ever been to England, like northern England in the winter? I mean, you can walk out of your street and not even know if you have a neighbor. I mean, we're talking fog. And you're just groping, like in your heart and in your mind and in ministry with your family. And you're like, where am I? Who am I? What am I dealing with? So these things are normal. Mm-hmm. All right, talk to us about when home is not home. What does that feel like?
Yeah, here's the fun thing about it is that I will say this: missions will ruin you for having a home, and I mean that because America is where I lived, grew up, born here, very much. I loved it. I was the very strong white evangelical Republican going over here. I understood that culture. I understood America. This is what we did. This is how we did things. And then you go over there and you at first are like, well, back home, back home. And then eventually that starts to wear off and Kenya becomes home, or wherever you live, that becomes home. Mm-hmm. And then when you go to America, people are thinking, oh, you're home. And it's like, well, actually, I mean, I live there. You know that, right? I don't have a place here. And by now, we've been here for a year. We've been over a year. And we still miss home.
Okay.
Because that's home. But when we go over there, and when we go in a few weeks, when we go there, there's going to be this thing that's going to happen where we're going to miss home. Mm-hmm. And we mean here.
Right.
Because now we don't, every time, when we're here, we miss Kenya. When we're in Kenya, we miss America. Yeah. So home is not home. You're not American anymore. Let me say that. The number one thing that happens is you stop being that American of who you've been your whole life here in the States.
Right.
Can
we describe it as an identity crisis?
It's more than, I think, just an identity crisis. Your identity absolutely changes, as well as an identity. I mean, so in a way.
So in realizing the change, I remember feeling this crisis in my heart. Who am I, and where do I belong? And am I standing on solid ground? Anywhere. I just felt like I was either, and one of the ways that I would describe it to people that had never done it before is you feel like you're doing a spacewalk, right? Out like in some space station, and you're tethered to the spaceship, and all of a sudden you get untethered, and you're just drifting. You ever seen those movies where the guy just drifts? And you're like, where's he gonna, and he can't help, and he can move all he wants, and he's just drifting further. And I felt like that in my heart, in my identity, who I am as a person, as a Christian.
Yeah, I think what ends up happening, the way I've heard it best described is, imagine if you were to draw a bunch of squares on a board here, and everybody's a square in America, okay? I'm not saying that you're all square like as in the old insult, but okay, everyone's square, and we all fit in, we all understand each other, we all fit a certain mold. No matter how different we are, we look around and we're like, we're all wearing totally different styles of clothing, we do different things, but we're still American, we understand each other. But you go into a culture and they're all circles over there. The square doesn't fit in with the circles. You don't fit in. But over time, you start to change. You start to adapt, and you start to becoming more and more like them. You're no longer fully square, but you're definitely not a circle. Maybe a triangle.
Octagon.
You're an octagon. Yeah, an octagon. Great. You're an octagon. So you don't fit in, but you fit in better over there. But when you go back home, when you go back to the States, you're not going back as a square. You're going back as that octagon because you've been changed. Your whole identity has changed. Who you are, everything has changed. And people don't understand in America why you don't fit in anymore. But you're like, well,
and you expect yourself to be able to just switch it off,
and
switch it
you
on.
can't.
But you can't.
You can't because again, now it's become your identity.
Right.
You know, for 7.5 years, we were the church planting missionaries in Kenya. We were the ones that were over there teaching at the Bible college. We were missionaries, and that was a huge thing when we came back. When we knew, especially when we knew that we were staying, it was that I'm losing a huge chunk of who I am.
Right.
I am no longer the missionary. I'm a
Right.
Christian, and I could still be, you know,
Right.
maybe doing church planting here in America, which, I mean, right now we're not, but I mean, I could be that way, but it's that missionary gone. And that was a huge thing. That was
Right.
a huge part of the process of trying to adapt back into American culture, was realizing that
Giving it up.
Yeah, you're having to give up something
Right.
that is who you are.
That's when I felt untethered. We had lived in that refugee camp, and we had, you know, started a Bible college and medical clinic, all that stuff. You know, and you remember we had the robbery, we risked our lives, people died. I mean, it was everything. We would literally put our blood into this ground, and then one day we just drove away.
Yeah.
And I had to say, Lord, and the Lord was working with me. Okay, Lord, that was your ministry from the beginning. Those are your people. You loved them. You knew their need before I was even born, and you called me to be your servant in this place at this time. But now that I'm walking away from it, it's like my life is over. And what's going to happen to it? It's like giving what you have lived your whole life for to somebody that you think might not do a good job because it's not you. And you're just walking away from it, and I just felt totally disconnected. And then when I arrived back in the States, of course, the timing and the speed of everything was just totally shocking, right? Going from Stone Age culture to Space Age culture. Two different, it's like they were going really slow this way, and my culture was going really fast that way. And I'm sitting at my mom's table, and she's all excited that I'm home, and she's just chatting. You guys know my mom? I mean, she'd just talk your head off all day long. She's awesome. If you guys know my mom, she's just awesome. So it's like, I'm just like overloaded by all this discussion, and I can't even reason with what's happening in me. And she serves me food that I always loved, because this is my mom taking care of her little guy. Doesn't matter that I'm 45 years old, I'm still her little boy.
Still a little guy.
She feeds me this food, and I'm trying to eat it. And it tastes weird, and it looks weird, and should I cut it with a fork? Should I pick it up with my hands? Home isn't home. And when my mom's dinner table was foreign to me, I had an identity crisis, and I just started breaking down. Where do I belong? How is this going to work? Right? So when home is not home.
Yeah.
So why does the Lord do that in our hearts?
I think that a big part of it is that He doesn't want us to be focused on the kingdoms of this world. And especially if we're missionaries and we're trying to build His kingdom, and we're trying to reach out cross-culturally, I think that that's one of the things that we experience as a way of saying, is what you're doing truly kingdom-focused, or is it basically it's like, are we doing things because we're doing them because this is biblical, or are we doing things because this is American?
Right.
And a lot of what we do in the church here in the States is American. It's not Christian. And I'm not saying it's not not Christian, but it's, you know what I mean?
It's not purely biblical.
It's not a biblical thing.
Right,
We'll say that. It's fine, and it's ways we honor God through, but it's an American culture that we have in our church. And so I think even coming back now, I'm looking at things, and we've been back a year, and I'm looking at the church and still looking at some of the things, and I'm like, I mean, that's fine. We're going to do it that way because that's what we always do in America. But you guys, this is not like the end all of this is what we have to do everywhere.
And change comes slow. So if things need to change, they're going to take a long time.
If things need to change, they take long.
Yeah.
But I think that that's part of the thing, is that I will say for sure, without a doubt, that losing that, having my American identity that I had before ripped away, and then having this missionary identity ripped away, it's it's just the same thing that God does in everything in our lives. He's always constantly pruning us, and because it's going to help us grow for the next phase.
Did you get a heavenly focus in the midst of this uprooting from American security, or let's say earthly security?
Yeah, I mean, when you're moving over there, you definitely lose that. I've got all the security of America, and your home focuses on heaven, and you have that mindset a lot more. And again, I think that the idea too is like we we got pruned, just like God prunes everything.
Right.
We got pruned when we went over to Kenya of a lot of American things.
Right.
Now we're coming back and we're being pruned again. And what does the pruning do? It always helps for future growth. That's the point of when you prune a tree, it's so that it can continue to grow healthier for the next season. And so it's like, okay, great. All this is going to get pruned away, and it's preparing us for the next season in our life. And I know people who I know a family that was missionaries for years, and they have been back for probably 9 or 10 years, and they're still kind of floundering around, trying to figure out where do we settle and what do we do, and they're still in that kind of bouncing phase, and you're like, what is going on? And I think that they're clinging too tightly to the old identity of who they were instead of focusing on
people can get
moving
stuck.
forward.
They can get stuck.
Absolutely.
I think just to add on to that whole identity thing, and what you're missing in your identity is when you become a missionary and you come back for your first furlough, there's privilege that comes with that. There's a lot of hardship, but your church kind of like champions you a little bit. You might have your face on the missions card. And I think with this last transition has been really hard for us with that identity to know that we're not the missionaries anymore. Our face isn't on that card anymore. People aren't going up and being like, hey, how's this going? And we're not getting Christmas cards from people that we don't even know in our church anymore. There's a little bit of that privilege that goes away. When you come back on furlough, people are like, I want to buy you lunch. I want to hear all your stories. We're not exciting anymore. We're kind of hanging around at the church and they see us every week. And so we're just kind of old news.
That was one of the hardest things was walking up to the missions table and realizing that our card had been removed.
Absolutely. It's one of those moments.
That was a moment.
The
we
trigger
are
moments.
no longer a
trigger
missionary.
Moments, man. My mom silenced your prayer card.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
Trigger moments. See, the Lord wants to do in us what he wants to create the heart of a pilgrim. David talks about he who sets his heart on pilgrimage, talking about going from the desert back to Jerusalem. In Hebrews 11, the author of Hebrews says very clearly that and you guys all know Hebrews 11, it's the hall of faith, it's all the list of them. And at the very end, and it says, and these were looking for a city whose foundations and builder was God. They weren't content with the world. And I think the best way for the Lord to do that in us is to take us cross-culturally, because we're ripped out of our culture and we have to say, okay, Lord, it's only you. Then he plants us into a new culture and he uses us, and it's amazing. And when we do come back, there's that excitement. And then he brings us back to our home culture, and now we don't fit, and there's no more excitement. And all of the millions of things that we can't even bring up in this class, they're all gone. And the Lord keeps saying, it's about eternity. It's about heaven. Be a pilgrim. And so you can either misunderstand it and let it shackle you, and you can't do anything. You can't pray, you can't move, you can't think, you can't walk with God or work with people. Or you can say, Lord, I'm going to trust you in it. And this is something that happens in a moment. This is a process. Like, you've been home for a year, I've been home for 7, right, long term. If your friends are still floundering at 9, if you allow it in time, God will set you free from this earth. And you could be living, and Paul says, I learned to be abased, right? And I learned to have everything and nothing. And in all things I'm content. That's what he talked about. That's the heart of a pilgrim, to be eternally minded. Yeah. Focused, fixed on heaven. And then just one thing to mention before we move on is when we're stuck in this situation of where is home, the amount of time that it takes to go from one home to another is how far you are from your original home. So let's say you were space age, Southern California, and you went stone age. It took forever to reacclimate there, or acclimate originally. Then it will take just as long to reacclimate back here. So the further you go from your home culture, the further you go from your most recent culture, the longer it takes to adapt. So somebody coming back, let's use the term from Canada or England, it's not going to take a long time, but they're still going to go through it.
Right.
But at a lesser level. You're coming back, as you guys read all this week, how long were they in Nepal for? Do you guys remember on their first furlough? It was like 12 years. And they came back and their kids had never been in an elevator. They had never been in a car. His wife got stuck in a car because she didn't know how to change the stick shift. She couldn't get her keys out. And she's a full-fledged doctor, banging on the windows in America. How do I get out of my car?
Yeah.
Some guy's yelling, put it in park, and then the key will turn. She's like, she's just in shock, right? Because she was coming from a place where there wasn't a road, I think they said, for 12 miles. They had to take a footpath for 12 miles, or they had to walk for 12 miles to find a road, and then get on a plane, and then get back to the States.
Yeah, I think that's an extreme case, of course.
Yeah,
but
England or this Nepali.
But and it
Somewhere
goes that
along
way.
there.
It depends
Somewhere
on. I mean,
along
think
there,
about like language differences. It's gonna, her sister lives in Australia, so when she comes back, she's already talking with Australian lingo and things like that,
Right.
and it's like, but it's English.
It's English,
but
yeah.
things change,
But
and
it's
then if you're
different.
learning a different language, then you start, trying to speak. I just tried to speak in Spanish, and Swahili comes out instead.
Exactly.
And,
But it
it's
used to be
like-
Spanish.
It used
Every
to
time
be
we tried to
Spanish
speak
that always
Swahili, it was
came out when I
always
was
out.
trying to learn
Yeah.
Swahili, and now
Right.
it's like I can't remember any of the Spanish because Swahili has pushed everything out.
Absolutely, yeah,
Oh yeah,
right,
and it
yeah.
does that. But then if you're also dealing with Western culture to East culture,
Absolutely.
and
Mhm.
I mean.
Yeah. Islam to Christianity, Buddhism, whatever, whatever level it is that we've talked about, and we'll talk when you guys are gone. I'm going to give them a chart about all the different things that happen. So the further you go, the longer it takes to adapt, the longer it takes to readapt. All right. So judgment. Talk to us about feeling judgmental. This is with your family, your pastor, everybody that you love, your missions pastor. I mean, you go down the list. Every single person you meet, when you come back, you're so different, and they're all still the same, and you expect to be just like them, but you're not, and you find yourself starting to judge in ways that you would have never judged before. And it can really be detrimental, can it?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, because you think about there's so many things that you can look at. One of the biggest things is in America we have so much wealth. Even
First of my notes is wealth.
Yeah. Some of the most poor people in America have way more wealth than what
A
we
homeless
see.
man in California is richer than most Africans I worked with.
And that is not an exaggeration.
And I
It is
discovered
not.
that as I was driving down Skid Row and the homeless guy was pushing his cart, and I realized he was richer, and I didn't know what to do about that.
Yeah.
I mean, judgmental wise, like how's that even real?
Yeah, and so when you see somebody who's complaining about their 4-year-old car, and you're like, 4-year-old car, man, I wish we could afford a 10-year-old car.
Or 100 people with no car.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things you can look at, or it's really easy as a missionary, and it continues even when you come back to judge how people spend their wealth.
Yes.
How people spend their money. And so even when you come back, that will continue. And so you're looking at people and you're like, seriously, do you know how many missionaries you could support with that, whatever it is?
And it's normally a non-essential.
And it's not, I mean, even ridiculous things like it's hard for me sometimes when we go out to dinner where before I would look and see, okay, you start looking at the menu items first. Now I'm looking at the prices, and it's not because I'm like, well, we don't have a lot or whatever, but I'm like, can I really justify spending this much money on one meal when I know how much this is a week's worth of salary for somebody over in Kenya?
Let me give you an example. Last night, we had a special occasion, special dinner. My largest supporter took my wife and I out to dinner, and he likes to do that. The price for my plate of food was more than I pay my staff members in a year, right? Because we're dealing with South Sudan, so the poorest place, the richest, and I had to smile and not even think about it because they know nothing of that world.
Right, and that's the key.
That was it. They know nothing of my world that I'm coming from.
They are doing what they
I've always known.
have always known, and always just expect that, hey, this is what we do.
Right.
This is what we do. They haven't seen what you've seen. Okay,
That's the key.
and that is a huge thing because when you see how Americans deal with their money, with their time, with what angers them. We've had issues before with things like how Americans treat their pets, and it's like people get more upset over how a dog that's mistreated in America than a hungry child in Africa.
Yeah.
People get more upset over it.
Yeah.
And it's because it's happening right here. And so that's the thing. It's the everything's kind of the idea of relativity when we talk about with morality. Of course, we don't like it, but let's be realistic. The problems that Americans face, they are real problems for Americans.
Absolutely.
And so we have this, like the joke, if you've seen
Yeah,
First
they know
World
nothing better,
Problems,
yeah.
right? The
Right,
First World
right.
Problems. Oh, I left my earbuds at home when I was going to the gym.
Right.
Man, what am I going to do now? And you're like, you have a phone, you have earbuds, you have a car and a gym membership.
Yeah, right.
Shut up.
And food today.
And food,
Yeah,
right.
right.
But for America, that's a problem. It's a real that people are really put out. And so, but when you go overseas, your entire idea of what a problem is gets radically transformed.
Radically.
And
yes.
so when you come back, we need to continue to have that mindset of these are real problems
For these people.
for these people. And culturally, this is, praise the Lord that that's the biggest problem in their
Right.
life. Let's be honest. Let's thank God when we see people who have what we would call first world problems. That Lord, thank you that that you have been there, and this is what
Right.
this is all they've had to experience.
Right.
You know, and focus more on that. I think that's a big deal.
When I got back from a certain trip, I was talking with another family member, and well, let me leave that story for the next topic. Okay, I'll switch gears. I don't want to do this one wrong. We got back on our second furlough, and we were working with refugees. And of course, refugees are the poorest people on the planet. There are no poor people on the planet than a refugee. Today, I got an email from the UN that we have 5 million people on the brink of starvation at this exact moment in South Sudan. 5 million people. So in my mind, the weight of this is overwhelming. I got back as living with these refugees to my mother-in-law's house. And my mother-in-law, my mom is not wealthy, right? But she's my mom, right? So I go have these issues at my mom's house. I go to my mother-in-law's house, which is extremely wealthy. And I'm sitting in this house, and just what's in the room is worth more. Like, because she lives, we call our house we call it the museum. It's so wealthy and everything's so put together, and it's like, can I sit here? Can I put my cup down there? You know, that kind of a place where beautiful. But now she's all love and concern, and she wants to pray and she wants to give. I mean, she actually comes to refugee camp and is there with us, with these people. So, I mean, she's a good-hearted woman, but her house is worth more money than I have truly experienced in years. And I'm sitting on her couch. It was Christmas time. I'm sitting on her couch and everybody's talking and like, this is so exciting that you and your wife are here and we're so happy, and baby Hannah's back here and we're going to see our granddaughter. I couldn't talk. I shut down. I couldn't think. And everybody's like, what's wrong? I didn't know. All I knew is they were all insane and I was the only person in the room that was rational. But was that true? No, I was actually the one that was insane, and to them, they were living rationally. And so I had to get to that point of saying, I want to judge them. But does God call me to judge ever? No. He only calls me to maybe keep my brother accountable and keep people that are with me accountable. But does he call me to actually, pronounce judgment upon people? No, it's not right. It's not righteous.
We've experienced those things too.
In their wealth, they don't know it.
Exactly.
Right, and you brought that up. A friend of mine came back from Hungary after the Iron Curtain fell and the communist thing fell. Well, Hungary was devastated. She had been there for like 4 years. Most people in her community couldn't find food even if they had money. She got back here and she was at Ralph's or Stater Brothers or some, a grocery store, and she was walking down the pet food aisle. And she started on one end. It took her like 2-3 minutes to get down the pet food aisle. And she looked at all of the choices, organic this and special made that and cat and dog. And she was like overwhelmed. She actually broke down, started weeping, and called my wife and said, how did you do it coming back from where you were at? There's more choices of animal food on this one aisle than there are for people in the entire country that I live in. How am I supposed to deal with that? So these were realities, right? So how do we deal with that? Do we judge? Do we get angry? Do we pull back? Do we not talk? How do we process through that?
The one word that keeps coming up in my mind is expectation. And
Okay.
I think when we have that expectation that people are going to listen to us, they're going to give us an ear, they're going to understand where we've been, we expect to explain our situation away and people are going to get it, and they don't.
They won't.
They don't. And so I think not having expectations and not pinning that on people to come with that. You know what I
Right.
mean? Because a lot of times that's where we get let down. That's where we're like, I'm alone in this world, but we don't even set that before people. If they ask, we could share needs and things like that.
Right. But they can't relate.
They can't.
They can't relate.
They're not going to get it.
Right.
I mean, we still explain to some family members, now, what do you do in Kenya? Like, what
Family.
happened? Like
Family.
Like a decade.
This is
It's like almost a
home, right?
decade. Yeah, right.
Every
Yeah.
single time, almost
Right.
on the phone with them.
Yeah.
Like, we don't get it, and they're not going to get it.
They're never going to get it.
That's okay. I
Right.
think just kind of coming to that point
Yeah.
where you're like, I'm expecting so much from you, and I don't expect, like, I'm coming with no expectations.
When the Lord started to work with me on this, what he really spoke to me, and it could have been just through the word or other missionaries, because it was such a fog. It's like this, just this weird transitional moment. And the Lord said, you're willing to lay down your life for an African that's beating his wife, that's a total alcoholic, that's completely unreached, he worships demons. You look past all of that to minister to him, but you come back here and you get angry with your brother, with your sister, because they have too much money and they don't realize it. Am I willing to lay down my life for the Americans?
Yeah, I think that was a big thing for us as a moment, and I don't remember exactly what had happened, but I was out for a walk, she was, I think, maybe at home or something, and we were having a discussion about, I don't know if it was family or friends or something, but we were frustrated about it, and we were realizing, you know what, no, we're back in Huntington Beach. We went from, working with some very impoverished people and things to a very wealthy
Absolutely,
city.
sure.
And we're realizing that, okay, these people are our mission field. We were, like you said, we were willing to go and give up everything and lay down our lives and lay down all of our all these things for these other people. Are we willing to lay down our expectations? Are we willing to lay down these things and
our lives
and our lives again, for sure? And that's one of those things about it. It's like, this.
So your new mission field struggles with, should I spend that much money on my animal, right? And your old one was, should I feed this child or that child, or which one? Right. But they're both sinners. They both need ministry.
Right. And I think sometimes the problem is that we look at these huge, massive sins overseas and we're like, well, they just need the gospel.
Right.
But when we come here and it's something small and you're like, what an idiot you are. How can you be dealing? No, and it's like, no, they are sinners in need of the gospel.
In need of the gospel.
And so I think
and if they haven't seen what you've seen, so therefore they have no expectations that you have, that's where we have to say, we take the back seat. Our emotions need to be worked through.
Let's just face it, we're all the weird ones here. We're the ones that are weird. We're the ones contemplating leaving America.
Glad you said it. It's so right.
And going over to, you're like, wait, everyone's trying to come to America. I saw a chart of like the country that like if country by country, what country do they want to go to the most?
Sure.
And more than half of them were like the United States. Yeah. That's like the country that everybody wants to go to, and it's like, no, well, we're willingly leaving that country to go to Uganda or Kenya or Thailand or South Sudan or China, and you're like, they're all trying to come to us. So we're weird. We're the ones that are weird, and so we need to understand that when we look at America, they're normal Americans.
So
we're the weird
you're
ones.
the nerd that realizes you're the nerd, and so you don't care anymore that you're a nerd, and you're good with it.
You got to be good with it, and just be
that?
like, all right, well, I'm the nerd. Everyone else is normal.
Yeah, pretty much.
I mean, they all are. They're normal. They need a savior still.
I'm called to serve and to love.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So judgment is sin, no matter
it is.
why I do it or where it comes from. All right. So just real quick, they can't relate, right? And we've already covered this a bit. And I remember coming home and talking with, did I ever share this story? No, maybe I haven't. I came home and I was talking with a family member, and I was going from one mission field to another. I think I was going from Africa to Asia. And the family member said, tell me about, because she knew about the old one. The old one was death and destruction and all this stuff from the war zone in South Sudan. And I said, well, now I'm moving to Sri Lanka. And it was the tsunami that took us there. 30,000 people die in one day. They're all unreached, and all this weight and pressure on my heart about the reality. And then there's this war between the Tamil and the Sinhalese people. So there's these Tamil tigers, they're rebels, and the Sinhalese people are government. And they're all killing each other, and they're blowing their kids up in the streets. I mean, it's just insanity. I think I shared it for about maybe a minute. My family member said, why would you do that? So I shared 1 minute. And as I was talking, and I was barely getting through that second sentence. I wasn't going on and on and on. I was barely getting through it. Her mind switched, and she goes, hey, did I show you my new Hummer? And we literally walked outside and looked at her new Hummer. And I had to, because now I've been on this a few times, so I was prepped for this. I had to say, no, tell me all about your new Hummer. I didn't ask her what kind of gas mileage she got. I didn't ask her any of those questions that I wanted to ask her, like, are you insane?
Do you know how many people you could feed with the monthly payment? And all of that.
And why that car of all cars? I mean, get out. Like, wow, that's really, you're blessed. So what I had to realize, she had no concept of what I was going through, what I was going to do, and I wasn't going to be able to talk her through it in those next 30 seconds to the next 30 hours she wouldn't have understood it. So I had to switch from what I thought was the right thing to do to what she thought was right, and I had to minister to her and love her. I wanted to shut her off and never talk to her again. We're talking family member.
You're supposed
Not
to
just
become
a
all
random
things to all
person.
people.
All things
And
to all
so
people.
become an American again to the Americans and talk
Yeah.
about their cars and talk about their jobs and their pets. And
She had a dog in her purse, little puppy. Dog in the purse, Hummer outside, everybody's happy.
you know, yeah, I mean,
Praise the Lord.
7.5 years, and I have family members that have no clue what it's anything about, don't understand it, and that's a big thing.
Right.
People in your church, family, they're not going to understand.
They're not
going
going
to care.
They're not going to get it.
And-
So talk to us about how Americans don't have any time.
I'd love to, but hold on. No. This is even worse than before. I think that when we first left and we first came back on like our first furlough,
Yeah.
you know, we were still dealing with the little Nokia phones. So
Oh,
it's
yeah,
like,
yeah, those sweet
you know,
little
do,
brick
do,
phones.
yeah, that little ringtone there. Yeah. Those are some sweet ringtones
That's
back
right,
then.
yeah.
Anyway, we had those, right? But we still were too busy then.
Mm-hmm.
We had so many meetings and our kids had sports and we got to go here and there. But now you walk around with all the distraction you ever need in the entire world at your fingertips.
Your hand, yeah.
And so you're talking to people and they're chatting and they're like, yeah, yeah. Oh, that must be bad.
And then now
Gotta double tap that
you're
picture on
pouring out your heart.
Instagram, and you're pouring out your
You're pouring
heart,
out your heart.
and they're double tapping to give a little picture of heart instead. And you're like, what is going on here?
Okay.
And I mean, just think about it. When you go out with a group of people at a restaurant or a coffee shop,
Yeah.
how many actually are on their phone when they're talking with you? Okay, so now you've got this you're going through all this crazy and you're like, I don't understand America and I don't get it here and why is everybody spending money on their dog and not
Yeah,
feeding people in
absolutely,
another
yeah, right,
country?
yeah.
And they're, yeah, it's tough, huh? And it's not, I'm not exaggerating. People do it constantly.
Do pastors do it?
Yeah.
Okay, I knew it. That's all we gotta say. I don't want to say what pastor or what. A lot of them do it.
Pastors,
Not
I'm
our
not.
pastor.
No, not your pastor.
Never.
Pastor Bill would
No.
never do that.
I'm not even being sarcastic.
We're not being
Yeah.
sarcastic about this.
No,
but our
I
pastor,
honestly know your
no,
pastor, and if
but-
I wasn't part of my church, I would be a part of your church because I just love him. He's a great guy. Yeah.
It's a great thing to have somebody who's been a missionary full time.
But you do find pastors that do it. So,
Oh my
so
gosh.
they say,
Pastors, friends, family.
They say after you're pouring out your life. Now you're talking about street kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I've done some presentations with you guys about street kids in Africa. They're sniffing glue and their minds get.
Yeah, they're shot.
It's insane, yeah. And the police had come in at certain times and literally killed all of the street kids and dumped their
clean the
bodies
streets.
in mass graves just to get them off the streets because they were robbing people. I mean, just heartache,
Mm-hmm.
right? Heartache. People after like 30 seconds, they just shut off. They can't do it. Okay.
Yeah.
Now I don't want to make it too intense, but you're pouring out your life about living there, about adopting your boy, about your boy having special needs, about your boy not living that long, and then people are like, oh, it's like after church, I gotta run. I got this. I'll call you. Right? We'll get together. Do they ever? Do they ever?
For us,
I would say 10% of the people who said they will call would call, and I think that's because we lost our son. That people wanted, like
Okay.
I think on a previous furloughs it was probably even less. People say it all the time. Yeah, hey, that just know,
Yeah.
and it's going to happen when someone says, "Hey, we should get together." That unless it's scheduled right then, it's not going to happen at all. It will not. I mean, you probably experienced that already. So remember that when you come back on that furlough, or when you come back and people want to hear all about it. We're a very polite people,
Right.
and so we're going to say those things, and we may be very well intentioned as well. That's the other thing. People are well intentioned. They want to, in that moment that they're talking to you, they want to get together with you, and so. Yeah, it's
But
not.
they're bombarded with 1,000 things in their busy
We are
life.
so busy.
Out of sight, out of mind.
We're
Yeah.
so busy. Yeah, and out of sight, out of mind. Absolutely.
Now talk to us about somebody says, I really want to know, and you sit down with them. Like, let's say they have you at their house. Do they actually listen for more than 5 or 10 minutes? Oftentimes we find we'll start to share, and the story or the thing, something you say will trigger them about a memory that they had. Like you'll talk about, oh, I got the boys into sports in Africa. And they'll immediately take that and talk all about their kids in sports, and everything you wanted to share with them, it never happened.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, a good rule of thumb when you're talking with people is better have a 30-second presentation.
Okay. I put 5
sec-
minutes on my notes. He's going 30 seconds.
I'm saying for the initial one, okay?
All right,
for the
right,
initial
right.
one
Start up,
is
yeah.
a 30-second thing. So
Right, the
people are like,
elevator
"Hey,
speech.
so
Yeah.
how's Africa? Africa?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's great. Yeah, what we've been doing is I've been working with a church plant that we've been trying to really get up and going, and it's been really good. We've been able to hand over the leadership, and I've also been teaching at the Bible college. It's been really cool. I mean, there's a lot of challenges there, but yeah, it's been a great thing seeing God move. Done. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So we should totally get together. All right, we'll see.
So we call that the elevator speech.
Yep.
What you can do from the time you get in the elevator, push the button until you get out, that's what you give them up
Yep,
front.
you've got to have that ready.
Right, that's
you've got
it.
to know
Boom.
that. And so I
But
start
you
thinking about
want
that ahead of
to-
time. And so if somebody
to talk
says
for like a half an hour.
you want
and
an
the
hour.
Kenyans would have at least wanted that much time. They want to sit, they want to drink tea, they
The
want to hold your
Kenyans would have come
hand.
over, and you, as Americans,
Yeah.
after 3 hours, are like, when are they leaving?
Right.
But they're ready to listen to more and more
Yeah.
and more. They will sit for hours and listen to whatever stories.
Whatever,
And,
yeah. So
and
you've now geared yourself into real fellowship, and you come back here, and it's like
We've
nothing.
geared ourselves to
Yeah.
to people just knocking on the door, and you've got to have tea, and you better cancel any appointment you have for the next 2
Right,
hours,
yeah.
and everyone will understand.
Sure.
Visitors just came. I can't make the meeting. Oh, okay, we'll reschedule.
Yeah.
And now it changes, and now we're here, and someone comes over to bring something, and you know they're coming over, but they're not coming to have tea. They're coming to literally
Drop
hand
and
something
run.
to you and run. The car is still running in
Yeah,
the
yeah,
driveway,
yeah.
right?
Oh yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that you can't do that in most cultures, and so but you get used to that, and you come back with okay. But even if you do get a time for a cup of coffee or a meal with somebody,
How much time do you get? to
5
pour your heart?
minutes.
Okay.
max
So 30 seconds, 5 minutes.
5 minutes,
And
you
then
might
how
get
much
it.
do you tell
might
them
get
in 5 minutes?
you.
Do you tell them everything you've ever done and,
No.
and ever been through?
Not anymore.
Oh, the first
You're right,
times
yeah.
we would unload, and again
Right.
that it's
It's overwhelming to them.
I can't even explain it, but you actually start to see the glass
Oh, yeah.
wall just thunk
Yeah.
right into
Right.
place, and they're like,
Yeah, they zombie on you.
"Yep,
Yeah.
totally zombie out on you." And we got to understand too. One of the big things, and I think it kind of relates to this, is when you're overseas, you're doing crazy things, and so you're dealing with a lot more crazy stuff.
All day.
We did
Every day.
we went to this debrief thing, and we did this whole exercise where we were writing out what kind of stress do you deal with on a regular basis? What are your culture stresses? And what are some of the big traumatic events you went through? And we listed out all these different things, and they said, well, think about the average American and look at your daily stress. How many of them would put those categories in the traumatic events? And it was like, that one, that one, that one, that one, that one. Wow, we lived a pretty, so it's like we get used to it. We build up this tolerance almost to trauma because you see it constantly.
You have to.
When you come back to America and they've lived a very cushy life, they can be almost traumatized by your stories, even though they haven't seen it. And what you think is a normal event can be something almost very
Where you can't
overwhelming.
share too much, right.
And so
Yeah.
you have to be very careful with what you share.
Right.
So when you're in the refugee camp and you're telling the story of the robbery, you've got to be careful of who are you talking to. If you're
Absolutely.
talking to a missions class, you can go into the nitty gritty because they
Yeah.
need to be ready for it.
Yeah.
But if you're talking to
My
your
grandma.
mom
Or
or
my
your
grandma.
grandma
Yeah.
or somebody
Yeah.
who's just who
Anybody,
has no
yeah.
clue what just happened.
No clue,
You know,
yeah.
it's the idea of when somebody comes up to us and is like, "Hey, you guys are back? Oh, I didn't know you guys were coming back. What are you guys doing back?" And you're like, "My son died." You can't drop that on
Right,
somebody like
yeah.
that. You have to be, "Oh, well, we're back on a furlough for a while, and we just needed a time of rest and recuperation, and yeah, so that's what we're
Right.
doing." You go through these things, and so there's sometimes where you're telling everybody the trauma things that you've gone through. And
So tell me if this works for you. What Jeff Jackson taught me years ago is he said, share a story about a person so that there's something to relate to, not just facts. Because I could say 5 million this and 10,000 that. Those are just numbers. No, I met this one guy.
Yep.
So I got the 5-minute window. I share one story about one person. If it's about a street kid, it was a street kid named Isaac that we used to work with. And I just share Isaac's story. And if I show a photo, I show one. What do I want to do? I got 50 photos that are my top ones out of the 5,000 that I took. These are my 50 top photos. Nobody can do that.
They can't even
2 or 3
do it.
photos into it, they're like
Yep.
overwhelmed, right? Unless it's something about them going on safari, right? And them doing something that pleases them, they can't see another picture of a kid or another picture of that. So one photo, one story. If it goes past that, let's talk about people that really slow down, maybe short-term missionaries, maybe long-term missionaries, maybe people that really know what it's like to live over there, then you can do another story.
Long-term
right?
missionaries
you
are going to
wait,
become your
right?
best friends.
You wait and you take it slow. And
Well-
if they glaze over after 5, you're good.
Yeah.
And a lot of times people just don't know what to say.
Mm-hmm.
You know, people like to talk about things that they know about.
Right.
And for a place that they
Familiar
have
with.
no frame of reference. Like, I don't even have a good question to ask you other than what language have you learned? Do you
Right.
use it?
Oh yeah, we've been asked more about. So, do you like have like lions around? We've been asked that question
Do you
more.
live in a mud hut?
Yeah,
Like, that
those
kind
kind of
stuff.
questions we get asked more than what are you doing ministry wise.
Mm-hmm.
They
And
won't
that can
because
turn into like a judgment thing too, where you can judge
Sure.
somebody because they don't know.
Yeah.
But that's not
Ignorance.
fair. People
Yeah.
want to talk about what
Yeah.
they know and understand, and they want to engage in intellectual discussion with you, but they don't know.
They don't know how.
and so they're going for something. They're reaching for what they know, and so you got to work with them and meet them on that level. And if they're going to ask you questions about mud huts and do you know. Have you ever eaten a zebra?
Zebra, right, yeah.
Then you go with it. You go with it, and you're like, no, I don't live in a mud hut.
Yeah.
No, I haven't had zebra, but I have had camel. You know,
Right,
things
yeah,
like that.
yeah.
You know,
and ostrich is actually better than chicken any day.
my
I
gosh.
didn't mean to bring it up. Sorry.
You're
Here's the
making me
way.
home-
Here's the way that when I came home, I searched for ostrich. Here's the way that
you
you
can
work
get it
out.
now, but
But it's hard to get. I was
and
waiting
it's
for it to like,
expensive.
take off, but it didn't.
It never took off.
So, it's a missionary chat, right? So here's how you work with it. You think, okay, it took me and my family 2, 3, 4, 5 years, whatever it was, to get to the point that I'm at now. How can I expect somebody else to understand that in 5 minutes, or even if an hour or two? Even if they see a photo or watch a movie, I had to live through it. So when somebody doesn't understand, I can't judge them, and I can't feel like they don't care. They just can't relate, right? And that's hard. So from that point, let's talk about the emotional roller coaster, right? One moment you're laughing, the next moment you're crying. Extreme happiness, extreme sadness, and you don't even know why you're going through these emotions. Have you guys been through that as you've returned home?
We're still going through it.
Okay. And you're pushing about 300 days.
Yeah, we've been back for a little over a year now.
Okay, more than that then.
And we still are going through the emotional roller coaster, and that a lot of it obviously has to do with our own personal loss in the family.
Absolutely.
But we still have a lot of those moments where we're just lying in bed and it's just like, I just miss Kenya. I want to be back. And then there's other times where we look back on some of the stories and we're like, man, can you remember that insane day that we had there? I'm so glad we never have to deal with that again.
Right.
And you have those moments of ups and downs. And
Think about when you first returned. Those first months, right? Not now, but those first months of just hitting the ground, trying to find a place, figuring out what you're going to do. Did you find yourself like in the store or in a restaurant? One moment you're laughing, the next moment you're crying. Like, you ever been like sitting, like you come up on furlough, somebody takes you to Claim Jumper, right? So the last place you want to take any missionary to is where they serve you more food
The
than you can
Motherlode
fit
cake.
in your, the Motherlode cake.
7-layer
Yeah, it's
chocolate
7
cake.
layers of normal cake. So one slice is this big, right? And you laugh at it. And then you start to cry because of it, you know?
yeah, we've had those moments too.
Yeah.
And I think
What do
that
we do in those moments?
you know what, to be honest,
What have we done, or what should we do?
What do we do? How should we process it? Will it last forever? Is it normal?
it is absolutely 100% normal.
Okay.
Every one of us will go through those times.
Okay.
It doesn't matter how many have taken a short-term mission trip, like to a developing nation, and you came back and you were like, I mean, I love your story about running your hands through the
Carpet.
20-year-old orange carpet or whatever it
at my
was
old
after coming
apartment
back from
after
India.
India, yeah.
You know, you're just like, thank you, Lord, for
I
carpet.
have carpet.
Yeah, and no, there's
My
those.
sink's broken, but I had a sink. You know?
Yeah, you have those moments and things of just like, oh, thank you, Lord, for the blessings that we had. But yeah, you're going to go through those moments of highs and lows, and it's going to be hard to explain it to people, and they're like, it's like you need to be able to surround yourself with people that they may not understand exactly what's going on, but
Right.
are going to give you the space to grieve.
Right.
And that's what it really is. It's going through the stages of grief. You're going through
Loss.
a huge loss. When you move, when you guys move overseas as missionaries, or when you move back, every time you go, it's a loss. It's a loss. You are losing friends. You are losing a home. You are losing an identity, a job. You're losing
A purpose.
A purpose. That is a huge thing for
Huge.
me. That was a huge thing for
That's
me.
really my
was,
identity crisis. Like my purpose is gone.
Yeah. What am I supposed to be doing? This is who we are.
I was a leader and now I'm a child. I have no purpose.
Yeah. Yeah, you lose a lot. You lose control over things because, again, you're at the mercy of other people's schedules
And you lose
other
wisdom.
people's.
Right? All that you gained your whole life, now it's all washed away and now you're just a little kid.
Yeah,
again.
because I learned skills and I learned how to do things in Kenya that I have absolutely no use for now in America. But right, I mean, there's things that you learn. How many hours did we spend learning how to cook beans? Because we always opened a can, and
Yeah.
now we've learned to cook beans, and we've learned to.
You sift them, get the rocks out of them, soak them.
I
Oh, you can use one of those? Oh, that thing threw my back out,
Yes,
man.
yes.
Oh,
I
man.
so wanted to bring one home and mow a lawn here just to mess
It's
with
like a big
people's mind.
sickle. He's
It
holding a
is.
sickle and he's like slicing at the grass. And all
I
you're
will
doing is
never-
cutting holes in the grass.
I will never. No,
It's-
you,
it-
you-
it-
it
it's
gets,
like
you
a-
get in a groove.
it-
Okay.
it's like
Once
a-
you
it's
get the
like a golf
groove, you're no
club
longer
with a big blade
you're
on
no
it.
longer
Yeah.
digging divots,
Yeah.
and you are actually cutting the grass,
Yeah.
and it's working well. And
It's
I
got
just
that rhythm.
imagine in a suburban area in Huntington Beach, just out there in the yard, and everybody was like, I mean, I
wrong with
learned
that
how to do
guy?
that. I will never use that skill here.
Ever.
I will never use, even if you can walk down a street with a machete in Kenya.
right.
That's
That's
not
right.
a problem.
Yeah.
I seriously walk down the street with machete over my shoulder. Nobody says anything. But there's skills that
Yeah.
you learn how that again we have no use for here.
I had this one missionary that came through. She grew up in the remote parts of Uganda, way back when there was no roads there. And a group of short-term missionaries were with me. She came by and she was on her way up to an unreached people group in South Sudan. And the short-term missionaries, these were all Bible college students, they said, "So what do you take with you?" And she goes, "Can't take a lot, but I take my clothes, just one pair of clothes, and I take a bowl and a spoon." Because to her, that was all she needed. And we were like, what in the world is she talking? To her, she was totally content with a bowl and a spoon. How is she going to survive at South Coast Plaza, right? How does she survive on Huntington Beach? But that was her whole life, right? So one moment you're crying, the next moment you're weeping. The friend that brought her, introduced her to me, he taught me one day, and I was working through all of this reentry and who am I and where do I belong? And he said, "Rob, when God called you to be a missionary, he called you to lose. Missions is a life of loss." And when he said it, it just like sunk in. I'm all, what? And it's exactly what Jesus told us, right? If you love your life, you lose it. If you lay it down, you gain it. He goes, missions is a life of loss. You leave all your friends and family and all that you know is normal to gain another people, and then you're so excited after 5 years to learn their language and be a part of them and have community with them and all that. And then God calls you on, and now you leave those people to gain a whole other people.
Yeah.
So missions is constantly a life of loss. There's definitely gain, right? You're not emptied totally. God fills you up, but you're constantly losing one to gain the next.
Absolutely. You need to talk to people who know what's going on. So, I mean, we had to go through time where I was going through and actually went to a counselor as well to deal with some of the grief and loss.
right.
And a lot of it was, again, due to losing Silas, but there was a lot more involved in that as well.
Yeah,
of
we didn't
loss
lose a
and
child,
identity.
but we thought we were losing our minds. Yes.
Yeah, know,
Right.
and
Yeah.
exactly, it's like you do, and that was a part of it. Was I was having nervous breakdowns.
Right.
I came back and I ended up in the emergency room thinking I was having a heart attack.
Okay.
And it was basically
Stress.
It was stress-induced heart palpitations and
Okay.
panic attacks.
Panic attack,
and it was
whatever,
it was
right,
I had been having heart problems, and then all of a sudden I was feeling pain shooting down my arm, and I'm like,
Oh, no.
I've
Here
got
it
like
is.
every symptom of a heart attack.
Right,
And so
here
I'm
it
at
is,
I'm at the
yeah.
hospital, and they're like, nothing is wrong with you except you have to get rid of stress and get off caffeine. And I'm like, can you you got to do something else because caffeine, seriously. But no, I had to deal with that. And so not only did I lose everything else, I lost good coffee for a long time.
I drink only decaf, by the way.
Oh, now I'm back on regular stuff. I'm very happy.
Only decaf
But
for me.
yeah, I can actually have decent tasting coffee now. But no, it was these. I ended up doing that, so I needed to go to a counselor. I needed to go and see
Yeah,
somebody.
and some people come through what we call post-traumatic stress, right?
Yes.
PTSD.
And I would put it this way, that we think about this as something that like military happens and everything, but it can be done to anyone that experiences trauma,
Right.
because it's not post-wartime stress; it's post-traumatic stress.
Yeah. What's the trauma? Yeah.
It could be anything.
Right.
It can be. There are so many traumas that you are going to see on the mission field.
Even in a country that's let's say organized, a European country, you're still going to have it.
You're still going to go through.
So we
a lot.
have, just so you guys know, we have professional Christian counselors. These are people that understand psychology, but they only base their thoughts on the Word of God. So they're wise with what we've learned in time with science and research, but it's all about the Word of God, and they do it for missionaries. So they understand the mind of the missionary, the mind of what's going on with them. So we do have counselors, even at our home church, we have two of them, a man and a woman, and like if a girl goes through a certain issue, she doesn't want to counsel with a guy. So we have a lady counselor. There's a lot of things going on there.
Right.
So as all this is playing out, I know we're just a little bit short on time, as all this is playing out, do you ever want to blame other people when you feel that stress and feel that kind of judgment? At least I put down in my thoughts here, don't blame others. Don't blame your church. Don't blame your family. Don't blame your leaders. It's happening in you, right?
I think
they
that's a
haven't
good
changed
thing
a
to.
bit.
Yep.
It's
and
all happening in you.
You figure that most of us are going to be the same throughout our lives. We're going to go through differences and things are going to change. But when we go overseas, we're the ones that have radically changed. So when we come back and nobody else is understanding it, why we're going through our laughter and our crying, radical, crazy, emotional roller coaster. Yeah, it's us who's changed.
So who do you turn to?
We have to turn to God, and we have to turn to other people who have been there before.
So the Word.
The Word,
But sometimes
absolutely.
you're so messed up in your mind, the Word doesn't make sense.
And so that's
there's
when-
that stage. So
Yeah.
who do you turn to then? When you can't read, you can't pray, you can't eat, you can't sleep, right?
I turned to my friends who had been there before.
So former
Long-term
Long-term
missionaries who have
missionaries.
already made that transition. I reached out
Right.
to Ed, and I
Yeah,
was like,
yeah,
Ed,
yeah,
I got to
yeah,
come
sure.
up. I got to talk through a couple of issues with you. And I
Sure.
drove up all the way up to like Morro Bay just
and you and
to
Ed
talk.
served together. He understood everything you were going through.
Yes,
right?
Ed had been is a missionary in Kenya for 10 years. Had been through some of the most horrific events as well, and went through and did that. Another thing as well is being able to get to some kind of a debrief thing. We went through a training out in Colorado Springs for a week-long debrief for missionaries,
And this was recently.
Yep, it was just last month.
So you're home for a year. and
I
you
will say
still-
this, yeah. Oh,
You still thought it was necessary. So
without
you
a
should have
doubt.
done it. How? When?
6 to 8 weeks.
Okay, so
after
you
you're back.
land, you kind of get through the fog.
You got to experience a few of those
organized
angry
debrief.
moments, and you have a few of those
Okay,
things where
yeah.
you see all the issues that you're facing now
Yeah.
back in America, and then you go to a debrief.
Okay.
And this is worth every penny. I'm like, at this point now, I'm
So
telling
what did
our
it cost
church.
you?
My family
Couple
of five.
thousand?
Yeah,
Yeah.
$3,000 I think was the cost for my wife and myself and our 3 boys to go for a
Okay.
full week. But that was
Right.
room and board,
Sure, of course.
amazing food. They did, and if you're going with kids overseas, you got to bring them through the debrief like this. It was the most amazing thing.
They did a
But
kids
that-
version of it.
Yep, it was geared towards kids, helping them
better
deal
kids,
with
yeah.
loss, helping them deal with grief, change, these different
From
things
their perspective.
at
yeah.
their level.
Yeah.
At their level.
Important
And-
what's going on for your training.
And yeah, we're all for like how much you guys have spent 2 years at Bible college taking
Right, yeah.
classes. You are invested in training yourself for going out. You need to train yourself on how to come back well,
All right,
how to
yeah,
finish
that's perfect.
well. And
All right, yeah.
they were all counselor. All the counselors have degrees, and they're former missionaries.
And they are, yeah.
And the best part about it is they were all the messed up missionaries. They're the ones that all were like, dude, you had a
Crashed and
crazy
burned,
stories.
yeah, right, yeah.
You burned hard.
Yeah.
And then God restored them and brought them.
And now they're helping
now they're
others,
helping
yeah.
others to keep them from
Yeah.
falling into
So
that.
did you guys
burnout
get
mode.
that? Missionaries, missionaries, missionaries. Your pastor will not understand unless he's lived it.
Your short-term
your
missionaries
brother,
won't
your
understand.
family member, short-termers.
Do not understand.
They want to.
They
They
do.
love you,
Yes.
but they don't have the frame of reference.
They don't.
You're not better. They're not less. They're not
Nope,
more.
they're
They just
different.
don't have the reference. Yeah.
It's different.
Okay, so long-term missionaries are crucial. All right, so with the last couple moments that we have, talk to us about spiritual warfare. You come back, and the enemy pounds on you. Let me just read you the things that I have here just to spark our thoughts. The enemy says when you look in the mirror, you're a loser. You'll never fit in. Your pastors don't understand. No one cares. Nothing that you did matters, and nothing that you're going to do now matters. Why don't you go ahead and just isolate yourself?
Just quit.
Just
quit
run away,
everything.
disappear, flounder, find a job, and just,
Yep.
it's just fade off into nowhere.
Well, yeah, you've accomplished great things out on the mission field. Hopefully, you've done well, and you've done great things for God and great things for the kingdom, which means you've damaged Satan's kingdom.
Right.
And now you're back, and one of two things can happen. You can either crash and burn and give up on everything, or you can end up being so on fire because now you've experienced the fullness of the kingdom of God instead of American Christianity, and just spread that wildfire here.
Right.
Satan's going to attack you, and yeah, I think every one of those things.
We could add 100 more, but those are
I've
just
gone through probably every one of those. Maybe not that your pastor doesn't understand because he's walked through it
But
before.
rarely do you have a
Again.
senior pastor that's ever lived overseas.
Yes,
Yeah.
he was a missionary for years, and
Yeah.
so
Very rare, especially within the Calvary movement.
yeah, because you plant your
We're a brand new movement, which means we have a lot of newer people.
and we plant and we stay.
Yeah.
Typically in Calvary, guys who have gone out and planted stay long
Yeah,
term. But
right.
he's been all over and did things. And our associate pastor is also a missionary.
Okay.
And so we've had the two guys that are in top in leadership
Right.
have been overseas, and so we are in a weird place. We are
Yeah. It's
extremely
abnormal, yeah.
blessed, extremely lucky. It's abnormal. Yeah.
I went to your
But-
pastor for training before I left.
See?
He took us out to Norm's. And it was at midnight on Beach Boulevard in Huntington Beach at Norm's. And he just said, love one another. By this love, all men will know that you're my disciples. It was the greatest advice I ever got in my life.
Yeah.
And it was Pastor Bill at midnight at
Yeah.
Norm's.
So all of these things are true. You're going to hear these things from the enemy. He's going to attack you in every one of these ways. And yeah, the isolation, it's easy because again, nobody understands you, right?
Yeah.
You've already felt that way from everybody in your family, all of your I say former friends, meaning not that they're no longer your friends, but your friends from before.
Right.
They've kept going down the path that you were on, but you've been way over here now. They don't understand you anymore. Most people at the church don't understand you. And so it's really easy to just give up on everything and just be like, you know what, I'll just go, I'll move to some other place, like you said, get a job, and just forget it. But
So what should we do?
go to church.
Yeah.
Go to church.
That's it.
Without get plugged into church.
Right. Let me
Start
give-
serving, even
give
if
an
you're
annou-
selling coffee at the coffee shop.
just be there.
Be there and get involved back into the family.
Two people I know well. First was my wife. I was in Africa. She had come home because she was pregnant. She couldn't fly after a certain part of her third trimester or whatever it was. And I had to stay and get the house ready. She got back to the States and she was so overwhelmed by all of it. Even though we helped plant the church, it was our church. She was so overwhelmed by it, she saw another missionary when she got to the, and she ran and literally held on to him. He was part of our team and he had been home for a couple months. And she held on to him like, can you protect me? Just from all of this. And we're like, you're home. She's like, I don't feel home. Another missionary that we sent out, she was a single girl, like they always are. She was working in rebel held territory, working with the kids that were being taken as child soldiers. And she had done that for about 6 months. Well, everybody put her on such a high pedestal that you're the superstar, get out there and conquer the world girl. She gets home and she feels like a total loser because she's going through all this reentry shock. Everybody wants to think that she's the most spiritual person in the room.
Yep.
She shut down. Stopped going to church for months. I had to track her down. You've got to come back to church. She ended up moving to a new city, starting in a new church and a new ministry because she just couldn't reconnect at her home church.
Yeah.
The enemy
I've seen
just
that happen.
bombarded her.
I've seen that happen with kids younger. When I say kid, I mean 20-year-old kids that have
Yeah.
gone out and
Singles.
And
Yeah.
that's a big deal.
Yeah.
There's a reason Jesus sent his disciples, grown men, out two by two.
2 by 2. Yeah.
Young girls that keep going out as well. Everybody needs to go out as a team, whether it's in a husband and a wife or going out with somebody else, so that there's at least somebody. No matter where we were, no matter how many crazy moves we had, at the end of the day, Adrian and I in our room, we could talk to each other because
Right.
we had been through it all together. We had been through Kenya together. We were going through reentry together. And that is such a key and vital part that we so often overlook. But there's no Lone Ranger missionaries, and you can't be Lone Ranger again on your way back in.
Right.
Getting plugged in with as many long-term missionaries, even if they've been back for 10 years already, they've been back in the country.
Yeah, that's the answer.
That's actually
Find the
probably better
long-termers.
because, hey, you can see 10 years, look, they're normal. And you get to somebody who's been there for a year and they're like, yeah, hey, we're, like for us, it's like we've been back for a year and it's like, all right, we've got the hang of most of this. We're still dealing with some stuff, but we've got the hang of most of it. You can get through it.
Yeah.
So you want to get around both, people who've
Right.
been here long term being like, oh yeah, you're fine. You'll be fine. And then other people that are like, yeah, it's still
They've
tough,
been
isn't
smoking
it?
something. You'll be fine.
No, when you see
Yeah.
somebody like Bill who's been back for 10 years, it's like 20, 25 years.
25 years.
25 years. He still understands it, and he's able to say that in a loving, kind way, like, look, you guys are going to get through this.
You will get through it.
You
It
will
will
get through
hurt.
it. You will get through it.
Yeah.
But
You'll feel like
even-
you're being drugged behind a car, but
Yeah.
it'll be okay.
I would add too that God is not disappointed in you.
absolutely good.
That is
Yep.
one thing that just comes out. He's disappointed with you. You've been out there for this long, and I thought there'd be more fruits. And God is not afraid of your emotions. God is not afraid if you're angry at Him, if you've gone through something, if there's injustice and you see it. He's not afraid.
And he's not surprised.
And He's not surprised by it. He's a good Father, and you can come to Him with all of that stuff that's going inside of you. There's no reason to shut down and stop going to church because you feel like God can't deal with that area of your life.
Right.
He can. You can take it.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, we left, when we left, we were able to say, mission accomplished. We left we look back and we're like,
And
is there
some
anything
don't.
left? Right.
Some don't. I'm
Right.
thankful you guys did, because with the loss of family members, if you would have had loss of ministry at the same time, like friends of mine were in North Africa, and the police came in and said, you have 24 hours to pack up, and they had to leave their 3 kids that they had adopted there, pack up and come home and never see them again. I mean,
See,
just instantaneous loss.
You know what? This
Yeah.
is, and that's terrible. But
Mass
what
debrief.
what
Yeah.
we're saying is, look, we can look back, and that was one of the key moments we knew that it was time to stay. When like, is there anything left undone that you need to go back and finish? And we said, no, there's nothing there. We finished what we had
Right.
set out to do. But even then, even though we came back, and you could say we were one of those
Successful.
very successful
right.
on that
It was
field.
ideal. Yeah.
Oh, the enemy kept telling me over and over that I was a failure, that I was no good, that I couldn't handle it, that I'm the reason why my family's having to go through all this
Absolutely
stress
right,
and this
yeah.
change, that it's all my fault, and if I was
Bombarded.
man enough and if
Yeah.
I was godly enough, that I wouldn't be dealing with
Yes.
this.
Right.
And
Because you don't want to laugh and cry, right? You don't
I'm
want to
the
do
guy.
it, but that's what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
so I think that the enemy is
Yeah.
going to try and take you down. So getting around other people
So
is the biggest
talk
thing.
to us just about 2 books. These are ones that I've read. You told me about another one, but Serving as Senders by Neil Perolo is the book that you read before you go, and all of the people in your prayer team and financial support, everybody reads Serving as Senders, especially your senior pastor. Gets everybody on board. But there's also Reentry Team. That's the one when people come back. This needs to be read by your team months before you come home. So hopefully I want to be home in January. Get this book to them in July, have them read it, and then God will start to work on their hearts on how the team that's sent, maintained, loved, and cared for can now receive them back well. And let me just give one just short story on the Serving as Senders one. When Neil writes this book, he was talking with a missionary, and she had talked about going into, it was Thailand, no, it was Vietnam. It was deep in the mountains of Vietnam, and she was hiking up into these villages, and kids were starving, and she's finding them along the road, dying, and she's loving them and taking care of them. She comes back home, and she's only been out for like 8 weeks or 15 weeks or something. It was quite short. She comes back home, and her pastor's like, yeah, we can get together maybe in a month from now, right? Nobody understood, nobody knew, nobody cared. She went back to her house after a few days, was so depressed, she tried to take her own life. So in one moment, she's serving God, and the next moment, she's trying to take her own life. Now, what Neil doesn't tell you in the book, that was a Calvary Chapel. And that Calvary Chapel pastor just didn't even know what was going on. Nobody becomes a pastor and wants to be, negligent with his missionaries, but these things happen. So these 2 books I highly recommend. You had a 3rd book.
I'll say first, Serving as Senders is the reason why we were able to stay out there for 7.5
All right.
years. we handed that over to a team of people that we had that was gathering to pray for us and help us with fundraising and everything. And that support team, that's the biggest thing. Oh my gosh, you got to get. They were 9 years together because they started so much earlier. But that book was what trained them on how to do it, and it was nothing we did. We didn't know what we were doing when we were gathering together. We're like, hey, let's read this book together. All right, that was it. The reentry team, again, same guy, so the same idea. The other one that I have, let me see what the author's name is, but it's called Looming Transitions. Looming Transitions, and it's a Amy. Hold on, let me see.
And we'll add that to our list.
Amy Young, Looming Transitions. She spent 5 years in China, came back for 3 years for education, went back to China for 5 more years, and then when she was asked to say, hey, would you talk about what it's like to transition? She was looking around and she's like, there's nothing good. The books that are out there, like that, I couldn't find the resources of transition or finishing well in basically in missions. Yeah. And so that's what this whole book is about, is transitioning both onto the field and off the field. So she recommends 4 to 6 months ahead of time.
It's for the missionary.
It's for the missionary.
Where the reentry team is for the receivers. This is for those that are returning. Okay?
These are great for your team of people who are going to be helping you get out there. Looming Transitions is all about preparing your heart for the big transition to get out there and come back.
All right, great, excellent. All right, you want to close this in prayer?
Absolutely. Lord, I just thank you so much for being able to come here and share. And Lord, with so many people here in this room that have now gone through 2 years of learning about missions, 2 years of preparation, 2 years of examining their hearts and doing this, I pray right now, Lord, for your blessing to be upon them and upon the works that you have called them to do. I pray that you would just bless them, encourage them, and equip them for the things that you have called them to do. As they head out, whether they're supporting missionaries or going as missionaries or both, I pray, Lord, that your hand would be upon their works in a mighty and powerful way. Encourage them, equip them, help them to stay strong in you, because you are the source of our strength. You are the source of our life. You are the source of all of our provision. Be with them. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Jonathan, for coming in and sharing your heart with us.
Absolutely.
Thank you both for that.